Hi, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of the AI Basecamp podcast. My name is Jonas Petersen, and we want to, with this podcast, try something different. There's a countless number of AI podcasts out there. We don't just want to add another one. We want to focus on one topic and one topic only, which is how to actually add value with AI models in your business concretely. I'm joined by Aleksander Obuchowski. Alex, maybe a few quick words from your end.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm head of AI at K2, and I'm a member of advisory board regarding AI under the Prime Minister's office in Poland.
And we want to today keep it short and to the point, but we want to talk about how to identify use cases, concrete use cases, and how to decide whether they are ripe for being enhanced with AI. As part of that, we need to at first talk about how to identify and actually express and define problems. We need to talk about how to research the market for different solutions. It can be AI solutions and can be other solutions. We also need to, for sure, at any AI conversation, look at the data, and data availability needs to be integrated there. And we will round the episode off with quantifying the value, at least talking about that actually very difficult topic in briefly, but still value-adding way. And we want to shine a light on the risk analysis that will inevitably come with any use case identification scenario. Let's, without further ado, jump in. Try to keep the whole episode to 15 to 20 minutes with the identification of a problem. And what comes to mind to me directly is an example that probably is going to pop up a few times today because it was quite recent for us, where we essentially leveraged generative AI for synopsis shortening. And what is extremely important when looking at use cases in your company and whether they're ripe to be solved with AI or not is that you define scope of a problem and objectives of a problem concretely. So in this case, for us, it was the case that we had a common task in the client company called MediaPress of shortening synopses for movie and series or media descriptions in general. And this task was fully performed for the past 3 decades, I believe, by a huge number of editorial staff. And quality was extremely important, but it was from the start like a quite clear example for using potentially generative AI to streamline the process and enable the editors to do more. And objectives were clear. We wanted to bring up or at least maintain quality while increasing coverage and become more efficient. But the constraints were also important to list them straight away. Like, would we be able to deliver on the claim of not losing quality, of maintaining the quality of synopses pre-Gen AI adoption or not? And to help you identify the problem, and this is also what happened in this case, it is very important to identify all important stakeholders in the company that will have important answers to the question and talk to them in as much detail and as early as you can.
You can also try looking into how critical is the process to your core company, because in my opinion, you shouldn't start implementing AI with the most critical processes. Maybe identify some low-hanging fruits, some way to experiment with your data. So it is also something that you should take into account when identifying problems. And obviously, what you said, Jonas, communication is the key. So what we try to do at K2, not only talk to product managers, but also talk to maybe accounting, talk to editors, talk to different departments, because they might have completely different perspective on what tasks are easy to automate, what tasks take a long time, what is the most, cost hungry. And developers might have some perspective where the data is processed, how much volumes of data, etc. So each department, different perspective, and communication here is the key.
And also probably understanding underlying motivations of the different stakeholders that you are communicating with. Once you have identified a problem, and we now want to move on to see whether this is a good use case, low-hanging fruit where value can be added. An essential second step, in our view, is to look at what's already on the market. So do some market research that shows and enlightens you about the different solutions that are out there. So are there competing solutions? Maybe you don't need AI. In our case, to come back to the example of synopsis shortening, maybe there are solutions that might even leverage AI, but they don't need to be in-house, but you can just go to a service that already offers such an API. You have to also understand like which methods to use in the market research. So in our case, it was something like surveys, focus groups can work well depending on the scale of the project and whether you see the need for such things. But to dive a bit deeper, and looking at competitors and also trends that might shape the whole thing.
Yeah, because adding AI might be, very, very shiny, very, trendy, but you have to look what the customers need. You don't want to be just another website that adds AI assistant to its workflow for no reason, essentially. You have to identify what competitors are doing. Is it something that you also need to do? You need to identify what are the needs of the customers. So do they need AI assistant? Maybe they need something different. They need to automate, this specific process because it takes longer time. But look at your app and look at the competitors. Yeah.
Let's move to the point that I already teased in the beginning, which can never be missing. If you have any problem that you identified and you want to solve with AI, you need to look at the data. What data is available? How good is the quality of this data? And is it sufficient to tackle the problem with AI? Oleg, I'm going to throw this over to you because I know that you've been deeply involved.
Yeah, for sure. Because data is the fuel of AI. So when you're looking at the processes that you want to automate, that you want to leverage AI for, you have to look at what data do you have. And again, coming to our use case, the company that we were doing this project for had massive data sets of already present synopsis, of other media metadata, and we could leverage this data set, train the model with a few examples, use it for evaluation, because what you also need to take account, because, okay, maybe you can use out-of-the-shelf ready, out-of-the-box solutions when you don't need to train them yourself. So there's no need for training data, but you need to still validate your solution. So you need at least some data that you can benchmark the AI against to know how well it performs, what is the precision, what are the false positive, false negatives, all the stuff. You need some reference data set. So first, look into your data, look what data you have. The more data you have, the more advanced AI algorithm you can train. So that's obviously better, but also you have to take into account quality of the data. Because if you have terabytes of data, but this data is noisy, it's not reliable, there is no use in it because the AI will get confused. It will not be able to generalize if it sees trash in the data. And also it's like very obvious, for example, in training AI models to automate recruiting. If the recruiters were biased for the past 10 years, for example, against minorities, against women, etc., and you train your AI model on this data, then the model will be biased. But it's nothing wrong with the model. There is something wrong with the data itself. So we need to really consider the data that the model is trained on before tackling a specific project.
And maybe we can just quickly circle back to the example we already introduced about synopsis shortening at large scale. I believe it was in the 50 or 100,000s a month for MediaPress, the client. And for that example, how did we go about checking data availability, quality, and what enabled us to make the decision that in this case Gen AI is the right way, and then also to set up the right pipeline for evaluating quality?
It's actually interesting topic because on the one hand, the data itself wasn't a problem for us because, as I said, MediaPress has one of the largest databases in the world when it comes to media metadata. So there was an abundance of data, and this data was also high quality because there were like quality processes in place to validate the data before it lands in the database. So we didn't have to worry about that, but we still had to worry about quality of our solution, because as you know, with Gen AI, it's not so obvious. The model can hallucinate, it can generate some really stupid examples, and we spent quite a lot of time on developing safeguards and validating the models iteratively with different prompt engineering, with different, searching for specific words that shouldn't be there, doing automatic evaluation. And in the end, we did sort of human in the loop machine learning. When the suggestions of the synapses generated by AI are validated by humans before they go to clients. And it's not full automation, obviously, but it's sped up the process significantly because the editors didn't have to write it from scratch. They have just had to just check mark that it is good. If it's bad, obviously correct it, but it's still quicker than doing this from scratch.
But what's interesting to keep there, sorry, to just quickly jump in, is that AI got eventually deployed. In this case, it was a large language model, generative AI, but we couldn't let it run without a human in the loop. We had to recognize that quality here was very important to the customer. He didn't want to compromise at all on quality, and for every output, synopsis shortened, a human in the loop needs to verify and check, because otherwise we can't be sure enough. So a compromise had to be made here, but it was worth going down that route. Which maybe to move to the next point, unless you have more on this.
No. I think it's really good to talk about the values that the AI you want to achieve with the AI model when we talk about this, because you have to obviously define what do you want to do, because maybe you don't really care about you don't need 100% accuracy, but you need 100% of the coverage. For each data you need to have a label, and if this label is 90% of the time correct, it's fine. This might be true from specific use cases, but from other use cases, for example, medical exams and stuff like that, you obviously care a lot about precision, and you can automate 50% of the traffic, but if the AI model predicts something, it has to be almost 100% correct, or at least better than the alternative test standard, because otherwise things could get bad. So define clear metrics. Do you care about precision or recall? So false positives, are there a problem, or maybe true positives are the problem? So if the model predicts something that shouldn't be there, is it more of a problem, or more of a problem is if it doesn't return prediction at all? And we'll probably do some specific episode just about the metrics, because it's not so obvious. Because obviously accuracy, the model predicts 90 out of 100 things correctly, but it doesn't mean it is reliable, because it can just predict one label 100% of the time, and because the distribution of the data is shifted, it's biased. So metrics are the key.
Let's dive into that deeper in a later episode, I think, because we teased before briefly when we said market research that you want to look before zooming in on the solution that you might feel is the best one, or a potential machine learning model. You should broaden first your view and check whether there's other stuff. But how do you actually go about exploring the solutions? It's okay, let's say we've identified the concrete problem. We can stay with the example or go beyond it. And if we now want to, in a somewhat structured way, not miss anything that could potentially be the best, how do we go about it?
Okay, so as I said at the beginning, obviously you don't need to train your own model 100% of the time, maybe even 70% of the time. There is already something on the market. It could be open source or it could be paid. The specific sites that you should look on, for example, is Hugging Face. That's like the biggest hub of open source models, and you can browse by category, etc. So it is good first place to look. There are websites like Papers with Code. It's more like, emerging research, so not something that is widely used, but if you're looking for some specific niche area, you might look there because it's a website that brings research papers, but also with code implementation. So there is great chance you can just use their model out of the open source repository. But also with paid solutions, this is tricky because you don't have, obviously everybody talks that their solution is great. Google, Amazon, Facebook, Azure, all have their own model for the specific things. And you have to look at benchmarks, for example, to compare the models, but also you have to be really careful because if there are paid solutions, obviously there is motivation to, polish the benchmarks and make them look great. So even if you know that, for example, you're doing speech recognition and it is quite difficult to train it yourself from scratch, but there are a lot of providers like Google, Amazon, Azure, but still try different providers. I'm not saying which one is better because it might be different from different tasks. Try different ones and evaluate the results. Don't just go with one provider just because you're familiar with it, just because they presented something. Always validate the AI model on your data and see how it actually performs.
I want to keep it towards 50 minutes, but I think we should give up on it because I want to also quickly explore the I think now again super current piece of news about the release of the Gemini models by Google DeepMind, and I remember the initial. Just as a brief mention to give some more like background behind your claim of commercial motivation and therefore the need to look under the hood, because what happened there, and some of our viewers or audience members might for sure remember, is that a couple of weeks ago Google announced essentially the rebranding and the release of a new suite of models under the Gemini title. Bard, they're now renaming to Gemini, and they claimed that their most powerful version, Gemini Ultra, I believe, beats GPT-4 on most major benchmarks. And I know, Oleg, that you have a rightfully critical view on the claim that was made by Google there.
Yeah, it is sort of, a specific thing that I looked into because I don't want to go super into the details. I can leave you a link to my article in the description, but essentially what happened is that I looked at the benchmark and, tried to analyze the benchmark myself and sort of check their claims, not even by running the solution on my own infrastructure, but just, comparing tables and looking at the different data points, etc. And actually found out that for example, they compared their own solution with GPT-4, but use different metrics for the comparison. So it's obviously, I'm not saying that it's, obviously intentionally wrong, or they are like doing this to confuse customers, etc. But maybe just negligence, or maybe just, drive to publish quickly and get the model out and rolling and not being, careful with it. But obviously it shows that there is problem because right now it's sort of an arm race between the most popular companies, so OpenAI, Facebook, so research and Amazon and Google, etc., to get the best LLM out there. And obviously a lot of marketing claims, but the benchmarks themselves are not ideal, and you have to double check them. So what I'm essentially saying is always test on your own data. So if you, for example, need LLM for assistant or something like that, don't just go with Gemini because you heard that it is great. Don't go with GPT-4 because you heard it is great. But try maybe top 3, top 5 approaches and see which suits you better. Because for your specific data, it might be very different than in the generic benchmarks, because benchmark is just a set of tasks, but your task might be different. They try to represent, the generic feel of the model with the benchmarks, to have math understanding, logic, different areas covered, but it's still just one number per model. It's obviously not ideal, and your use case might be different.
Always consider exactly what your use case is, exactly the topic of today's conversation, and compare critically if your models don't just believe the claims. let's move on and maybe cover. I know this can again be a session in itself, an ROI session, but let's cover briefly. We have now identified a problem. We've looked at the market. We've looked at the data situation. We've also looked at existing solutions off the shelf or competing self-implemented ones. We want to now quantify the value that we can actually generate for our business here, because this will, in the end, like we're living in capitalism and we're all guided by financial outcomes of our projects, will be the decision of whether to make or break, or at least not implement this problem with an AI solution. So when I'll maybe quickly start and then again pass it over to you, but when you want to quantify the value for that you can achieve here with for whichever problem you're currently evaluating, what's important to do first, in my opinion, is to define metrics. Define the correct metrics that can help you evaluate initially, but also once it's running, how much economic value you're actually generating. You need to try to. It's a tricky. It's there's no universal answer, I think, but you need to try to make assumptions that can help you estimate the impact on these values. And to become a bit concrete again, and I'm circling back to the initial example, not to introduce a new one. In the synopsis shortening case, the project that was implemented in the last 2 quarters, even slightly before, the metrics of importance, but Alex, please add here if you want, are the amount of time that we can save the editorial department, or going hand in hand, the coverage, the amount of coverage of synopses that we can shorten with the same workforce in the same period of time, the increase in coverage. Those are 2 strong metrics, but also very importantly, and one that's actually now serving to afterwards demonstrate success, is related to the quality of the LLMs, the AI doing the source shortening themselves. And here a metric that we implemented is how many synopses are accepted by the editors without the need for correction, and how many only need minor correction, and how many need major correction. This is to give an example for a metric that can be used once the model is up and running, but possibly already also be estimated in the planning stage, the use case identification stage, and then help inform decisions on whether to go forward or not with the project.
Yeah, it depends on the use case, because, for example, in our case, our client MediaPress cares a lot about coverage. So each data record should have the synopsis ideally, but they also care about quality. So they don't want, just generic synopsis there. They want high quality stuff. So we sort of try to find a good balance between those 2 metrics. You can also, do it from the bottom down. So for example, see how long each task takes that you are, considering to automate. How often is this performed? How many people do it? It doesn't mean that you want to replace these people with AI, but just sort of give you the sense of the cost, because you can obviously move those people to some other task that will be, like, for example, more challenging for AI and more profitable for you, and this boring task will be automated. But you have to, at the end, and it's tricky, but you need to have a rough estimate of monetary value for this thing. So obviously the time saved is one value, because it can be directly converted to hourly rate, etc. But also, maybe because you have better data, because you now can explore areas that you weren't able before, you can get new clients, maybe smaller clients that can't pay for humans but can pay for automated AI stuff. So it will be new business for you. So also monetary value. You have to, obviously minimize cost and maximize revenue. So you have to look at those 2 columns when considering AI solutions. But those columns themselves are quite tricky. So you have to look at the immediate steps, such as coverage, quality, accuracy, etc. Because those are like the preliminary results, but of course in the end coming down to profit and cost saving, but are easier to estimate for you.
What's for sure also always important is to involve, and we said this before, but it also applies to these steps, all stakeholders that could potentially add important value here. Because from defining the right metrics to making the best assumptions you can before actually implementing or while only having a rough idea, to then actually when it's running, double checking and verifying whether what you're seeing and what the logging system that has usually been implemented by that point is telling you the truth. Over all these process steps, it's important to consult with the people who know the business well, who are at the forefront of the respective thing that the metric tries to capture. Let's to maybe not cut it too long, wrap today's episode up with risk analysis. Maybe not the most exciting. Let's try to make it exciting. The analysis of the risks that come with using AI for our specific problem, for our specific use case. Alex, go ahead and start on it.
Yeah, so we obviously need to care about copyrights because our model needs to be trained on something. When we show them, for example, the long descriptions and the ideal short synopses in our case. But what about the source text? Are they written by our editors, or are they, for example, bought from someone, or are they brought over by a clients, etc.? If those are client texts, we can't use them because there will be infringing on their copyright. We only want to use our own text. They also have to be, substantially different from the source text, not to, again, produce plagiarism or even self-plagiarism, but also you need to care about stuff like that. It's quite a problem because our case was quite favorable in this, I would say, because we were training the model on our own data. But for example, when you use out of the box like image generation model, you really don't have any guarantee that it will generate something that is similar to, for example, a painting of an artist, and you can, use it somewhere in your product, and then later the artist can sue you. And we're not legal expert, but we just those are the risks that you need to take care about. And obviously, right now this is changing because all the providers like OpenAI, DALL-E, etc., are becoming more aware of the copyright issues, and for example, don't allow to replicate paintings of living artists. So there are safeguards already there, but also you have to, look into it yourself and be maybe, in stuff like classification, information extraction, image recognition, etc. It's not a huge problem, but with generative AI, if it's published publicly somewhere, you always need to take it into consideration.
And what we're saying here mainly is that this, in the worst case, can lead against a decision of using AI or at least the models you were considering for the identified problems. But oftentimes it doesn't have to, as long as it's considered carefully at this stage.
Yeah.
And what can often, I think, also probably help, sorry, just to finish this point quickly, is to implement a certain self-checker monitoring solution, right? That the results that are produced by the AI for this specific problem, and we're talking generically here, is indeed, and we're still in the copyright issue, but not infringing on any copyright. Sorry, Alex, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, because what you said, it can make or break a project because it's not only about copyright, but also about, GDPR and other, for example, data regulations. For example, if you are, developing clinical AI, and for example, you can just use ChatGPT, and the ChatGPT, let's not talk about how reliable, how accurate it is. Let's assume ChatGPT gives you a good result. But it's not the end of the story, because ChatGPT is hosted on OpenAI servers. So you have to take into consideration where are the servers located physically, because you can't transfer EU citizens' data to America servers, etc. And you also need to take care about what data are you sending to them, because you shouldn't send any personal information. So, stuff like banking, hospitals, etc. Obviously in favor of implementing your own solution or just deploying existing solution, but on premise if they allow it. But also there are some ways of dealing with it. So for example, you can do pseudonymization, where you, for example, replace specific name and surname and some, social security number with just random name and surname. So the algorithm still consider it as a name and as some number that should take into account, but it's not the real data. So, for AI, it's real because it has no way of telling, and it, for example, performs the classification the same way. But for legal reasons, you're not sharing the real data. And also, maybe generalize. So for example, stuff like the age of a person. You don't need to give specific age to AI models. You can just do it in sort of brackets, like 10 to 20, 20 to 30, etc. Because the differences are usually small and insignificant in prediction. So, yeah, pseudonymization, taking care about what data you can and can't share, where are the servers physically located, on premise or in cloud. Obviously, some cases make or break, and also maybe try to share as little data as possible, essentially.
And I'm gonna try to wrap this up on a optimistic note, even though it is a critical topic as well, because upon that risk analyzing of the risks of using AI for this specific use case, what you of course also need to consider is the societal and also social level within your company. How is it going to affect the mood of the employees? Is it going to make a few jobs redundant? Is it going to create new jobs? And that debate we can't settle now in 1 minute, and it is also very use case specific. But and maybe I'm pushing a young and slightly naive view here, but a view that I generally have seen so far to be right, and it is quite optimistic, is that AI should, if used correctly, and you need to take those steps and think carefully about the strategy, always lead to, even if there is some redundancies or reductions on one hand, to enablement and potential new fields that you can go into, or that you can go into in more depth than you could before. So there's always also more creation on the other side. I guess it is a topic that it's hard to answer in
it's not
a
an
few
easy topic.
sentences.
So
Yeah.
we definitely need to do another episode on it. But yeah, basically people tend to be scared, and it's not their fault because, for example, the media tells them that AI will replace them. They'll hear it from many different sources, etc. And even if you have the best intentions and don't plan on doing any layovers, etc., people might not trust you, and they're rightful to do so. So it's like, it's not their fault. It's your job to convey the message in a good way. And for example, explain them how it works basically. So it's not just like a magic box that gives prediction, but it fits on data. So it can help you with your workflows, and you can move on to better things, like more creative things, etc. And don't have to do the boring tasks. Give people incentive and explain how it works and how it make your job easier. Essentially, it's like the one sentence advice I would give.
A debate that I could drag you into right now, because I find it very interesting, but we should probably also leave it for another time, is looking back into history and seeing how technological progress has never led to, at least not for an extended period of time, a higher unemployment rate, but always just to a change of what it is that people do. And that's the way I think we can, at least for the foreseeable future, also look at this topic. Should we wrap it up here, or big things said?
We covered a lot of stuff, obviously, and we obviously see that not everything can be explained right now, and there are potential topics for future episode. But I think that's it for now. We are running more than 30 minutes long, so it's probably good point to wrap it up.
Maybe the only thing we mentioned is that we're planning to continue in 2 weeks' time. I think a bi-weekly period here makes sense. And we will focus on the next step that has been brushed over today, but deserves more detail, which is that once you have your use cases identified and maybe are starting to rank them, ROI calculation, so return on investment calculation, becomes inevitably important, and that is going to be the central topic of the next episode. But for now, just thank you everybody for tuning in. Alex, thanks so much. Great first episode, I believe. See you all at the next one.
Thank you also, Jonas. And if you like the episode, don't forget to like, share, and follow us for the next episode, probably in 2 weeks. See you by then. Thank you for listening to AI Basecamp podcast. If you need help implementing AI solutions, go to K2AI and book a free consultation today.